When you think of the institution of education, do you think of its twin? Its twin is work. They are so inextricably linked that, as Robertson once said, you can't change one without changing the other, and change to any of them is going to be painfully, painfully slow. I'm Captain Sociology, and we're finishing up our look at education for now. I wonder, what do you think of when you think of what we should do to change education? Well, I've got some suggestions. You see, changing an institution is really very challenging. Nobody wants to change. Lots of people and lots of institutions have a reason for another institution to remain as it is. But I have a problem with that. Not the position. I don't think Robertson was particularly wrong about it. I have a problem with the fact that we have some institutions that have changed significantly, while others have remained completely the same. And that's where I think the problem of our twin comes in. You see, before the Industrial Revolution, as we've discussed a little already, work really required you to have specialist knowledge about your local area, your local produce, your land, the kinds of crops you were growing. And I'm not saying we didn't learn all that information in a way that was super useful. Of course we did. But until the Industrial Revolution, the kind of learning that we think about now as being essential to success in life was the preserve of church schools and the nobility. And we have talked about that a little bit. You see, for 1200 or so years in the Western world, the reason that you would learn to read and write was to be able to read and interpret, comment on, and communicate between people who were interested in understanding the Christian Bible. And yes, there were a small number of people, typically some sort of noble connection by birth, who would be learning to read and write to facilitate life at court. But in general, until the Industrial Revolution, the reason people were learning to read and write was religious in nature, and schools were co-located with churches. We move into the Industrial Revolution, and what we discover is that people are needing to be able to read and write to undertake a range of tasks within the industrialised world. It's not that there weren't readers and writers beforehand, but the need for literate people increases during the early Industrial Revolution. And so we see schools moving from being a purpose connected to religious observation, connected to, if you think about our mechanical versus organic solidarity, pre-industrial, in the agricultural era, education was really focused on getting people on the same page in terms of values and agreed upon behaviours. That's why you would read, is to be able to absorb, the Bible and to be able to respond to it. In the industrial era, what we discover is people are learning to read and write, not for religious reasons, not for values-based reasons, but for work. And so in a sense, work becomes the value rather than work becomes the value, and school therefore also is kind of a value rather than being a means to an end. So we go from having agreed upon values to the industrial era, where suddenly we're going to agree less and less upon core values over time, and education is really essential for actually allowing people to discover all the different ways that they can express themselves and be productive members of society. And so we get this significant shift as a consequence of the Industrial Revolution. The industrial era is over. We're in the fourth Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution that education was re-envisioned for is over, gone, past, it's done. And yet, although some of the ways that we undertake our educational activities within a classroom have changed, the actual intent and the broad scale application of education hasn't changed significantly for over 200 years. Once upon a time, people learnt on the job. They went, they did. They maybe had to go for a big stand and a long wait. I'm not necessarily condoning that. But what happened was that they would learn the skills they needed in the particular environment that they found themselves. Education, public education, enabled people to learn the skills they needed for the particular environment of work in the industrialised world. We are in the fourth industrial revolution. The way the world operates now is vastly, vastly different to that for which education was imagined for the whole population. Does that mean we don't need education for the whole population now? No. But we have to look at how it is approached so that it is meaningful for the whole population. It's no longer that we educate people because of a religious observance or a religious obligation. That era obviously is over. Learning because you need to be able to count effectively and write effectively enough to undertake some kind of mid-level clerical job. Those jobs are over. Most of those jobs are now being done by spreadsheets that people are programming. And so the kind of education that we need has to fit our position in the fourth industrial revolution. And no doubt with the rise of AI, we're really looking at the fifth industrial revolution without doubt. And that's what I'm talking about. We have to imagine education in a way that actually gives purpose to the activity of being at school in the 21st century. Should we encourage curiosity? Absolutely. Encourage creativity? Absolutely. Should people be literate? Absolutely. They're not the argument. The argument is, how do we infuse education with a purpose that's more relevant now than it was 200 years ago? So this is the end of our look at education. There's a lot more to discuss. Absolutely. We've really only scratched the surface. Education will continue to show up in the news persistently. It is one of the big political handballs that gets tossed around during elections, during debates. So we will certainly be coming back to this topic at another time. In the meantime, I've been Captain Sociology. It's nearly dark outside. I'll catch you next time.